The morning sky above Earth turned dark as massive alien ships blocked out the sun. General Park Ji-ho stood on the observation deck of the Global Defense Command Center, watching the enormous vessels hover in the atmosphere like metal clouds. His hands gripped the rail as he counted them. 50 ships. Maybe more, each one larger than any human city. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission," Lieutenant Cho Hannah called from her station. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. "It's from the lead ship, put it through," Park Ji-ho said. He had been a soldier for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The moment when humanity would meet its first alien visitors, and from the size of their fleet, they had not come in peace. The main screen flickered to life. The creature that appeared made several officers step back in fear. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales that reflected the light. Its eyes were yellow and cold, like a snake's eyes. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. "I am Admiral Vexfer of the Vorthok Empire," the alien said. "Your pathetic world now belongs to the Galactic Coalition. You will surrender immediately, or we will take it by force." Park Ji-ho stepped forward. "This is General Park Ji-ho of Earth's Global Defense Command. We will not surrender our world to invaders." The alien laughed. It was a terrible sound, like grinding metal. "Invaders. We are liberators. We free worthless species from the burden of thinking they matter." Vexfer's yellow eyes seemed to look directly at Park Ji-ho through the screen. "Tell me, General, what makes you think your frozen wasteland is worth defending? Our world is not a wasteland." Park Ji-ho replied firmly. "No." Vexfer turned to something off-screen. "Show me your northern territories. These areas you call Tundra and Arctic regions." The screen changed to show satellite images of Earth's northern regions. Vast stretches of white ice and snow covered the land. No cities, no visible signs of life, just endless frozen wilderness. "Look at this," Vexfer said with disgust. "Millions of square kilometers of useless ice. What kind of species chooses to live on a world that is half frozen? You are ice rats, hiding in caves and eating scraps." Behind Park Ji-ho, the officers muttered angrily. Colonel Kim Dae-ho stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Our Arctic regions are not wasteland. They are home to millions of people who have adapted to live there." Adapted? Vexfer laughed again. "You mean they crawl around in the snow like animals? How disgusting. When we claim your world, we will melt all that useless ice and make something productive from it." The alien admiral gestured to the frozen landscapes on the screen. "These empty frozen lands will be perfect for our waste disposal. We will fill them with the garbage from civilized worlds. Your ice rats can live in the trash if they want to keep their precious cold." Park Ji-ho felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. "You underestimate us, and you underestimate our world." "Underestimate?" The Vexfer's laugh was even louder now. "General, we have conquered 47 worlds. We have destroyed species far more advanced than yours. What could you possibly have that we should fear?" Before Park Ji-ho could answer, another alien appeared on the screen. This one looked like a giant insect, with multiple arms and black compound eyes. When it spoke, its voice buzzed like a swarm of bees. "Admiral Vexfer speaks truth," the insect creature said. "I am Hive Commander Zekthera of the Nexari. We have studied your world. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are weak. And half your planet is covered in frozen wasteland that no intelligent species would want. The cold regions are strategically worthless," Vexfer added. "We will focus our invasion on your cities and productive areas. The frozen wastelands can wait. Nothing lives there anyway." Park Ji-ho exchanged glances with Colonel Kim Dae-ho. Both men knew this was not true. The Arctic regions were home to research stations, military bases, and communities that had learned to thrive in the harshest conditions on Earth. But if the aliens wanted to ignore those areas, perhaps that was a mistake they could use. "Your first lesson in human nature," Park Ji-ho said carefully, "is that we survive in places where others cannot." Vexfer dismissed this with a wave of his clawed hand. "Survival is not the same as strength. General, watch now, as we demonstrate real power." The screen changed to show a view from space. One of the alien ships moved toward Earth's atmosphere. A bright beam of energy shot down from the ship and struck a mountain in the distance. The entire mountain disappeared in a flash of light, leaving only a smoking crater. "That was a demonstration," Vexfer said. "We could destroy your entire world from orbit. But we prefer to take worlds intact. They are more useful that way. You have 1 hour to surrender." Hive Commander Zekthera buzzed. "After that, we begin orbital bombardment of your major cities. We will work our way down from the most important targets to the least important. Your frozen wastelands will be last, if we bother with them at all." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Park Ji-ho stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. The aliens had made one thing very clear. They saw Earth's Arctic regions as worthless frozen wasteland. They planned to ignore them completely during the invasion. "Sir," Lieutenant Cho Hannah said quietly, "what are your orders?" Park Ji-ho turned to face his officers. "Send word to all our Arctic bases and research stations. Tell them to go dark. Complete communications blackout. And get me a secure line to the Siberian deep weather station. Colonel Kim Dae-ho frowned. Sir, that station has been abandoned for years. No, Park Ji-ho said quietly. It has not been abandoned. It has been waiting. Outside the command center windows, the alien ships began to move into attack positions. They spread out across the sky, positioning themselves over Earth's major cities, but none of them moved toward the polar regions. They truly saw the frozen lands as worthless. As the first alien attack began, Park Ji-ho thought about the vast frozen wilderness that covered so much of Earth. The aliens called it wasteland. They called the people who lived there ice rats. They had no idea what lived in those frozen places, what waited in the endless white silence, what was about to wake up. The invasion of Earth had begun, but the aliens had made their first mistake. They had ignored the places where Earth's most dangerous predators learned to hunt. In the frozen north, something stirred in the eternal ice. Something that had been sleeping for 15 years. Something that the aliens would soon learn to fear. The real war was about to begin. 300 kilometers north of the nearest city, buried deep beneath the Siberian snow, Kong Min-ho watched the alien broadcast on a flickering OLED screen. The underground facility had been his home for 15 years. Most people thought it was abandoned. Most people thought he was dead. Min-ho sat perfectly still as the alien admiral laughed at Earth's frozen regions. His dark eyes showed no emotion, but his hands slowly clenched into fists. The aliens called his world a wasteland. They called humans ice rats. They had no idea what lived in the ice. The transmission ended, and the small room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the heating system. Min-ho reached over and turned off the screen. For a moment, he stared at his reflection in the dark glass. A stranger looked back at him. His hair was longer now, streaked with gray. His face was marked by 15 years of harsh cold and bitter solitude. He stood up slowly, his joints stiff from sitting too long. At 42 years old, his body still moved like a weapon, but it carried the weight of too many memories. Too many ghosts. Min-ho walked to the small kitchen area and made tea. With practiced movements, the routine was important. Routine kept the mind sharp when living alone in the endless white silence. He had learned that lesson the hard way. As he waited for the water to boil, a soft beeping sound came from across the room. Min-ho froze. No one had contacted this facility in over 3 years. The last message had been a supply drop confirmation. Before that, nothing for 5 years. He moved to the communications console and saw a flashing light. An encrypted message waited in the system. The encryption code was old, from before his exile. Only a few people in the world knew how to reach him here. Min-ho input his access codes and opened the message. Text appeared on the small screen. Snowwolf, this is Mountain Flower. The ice is breaking. The rats need their ghost. Mother sends her love. Time to come home. Min-ho stared at the message for a long time. Snowwolf. No one had used that code name in 15 years. Mountain Flower was his sister, Dr. Lee Sora. She worked for the government now. Something to do with biological research. They had not spoken since he disappeared into the frozen north. Mother sends her love. That was code 2. It meant the message came through official military channels. Someone very high up wanted him to read this. The rats need their ghost. Min-ho almost smiled at that. The aliens had called humans ice rats. His sister was telling him that the ice rats needed their ghost. That was what his old unit used to call him. The Arctic Ghost. He deleted the message and turned away from the console. For 15 years, he had hidden in this place. For 50 years, he had tried to forget who he used to be. But the world was ending, and his sister needed him. Min-ho walked to a locked metal cabinet in the corner of the room. He had not opened it in 3 years. Inside were items from his former life. Weapons, equipment, and memories he had tried to bury. He pulled out a small photograph, yellowed with age. 7 soldiers in winter gear stood together in the snow, smiling at the camera. The Frostwolves, his old unit. 6 of them were dead now. Only Min-ho remained. Beneath the photograph was a military file marked with his old rank and unit designation. Captain Kong Min-ho, Special Operations Command, Arctic Division. The file contained mission reports, commendations, and finally, the incident report that had ended his career, Operation Iceblade. A terrorist cell had taken over a research station in Antarctica. 12 hostages. His team had been sent to eliminate the threat. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Min-ho closed the file without reading it. He knew every word by memory. He had lived with those words for 15 years. He reached deeper into the cabinet and pulled out a black tactical vest. It was old but well maintained. Sewn into the fabric were pockets for ammunition, medical supplies, and survival gear. Everything a soldier needed to operate alone in the frozen wilderness. Next came the weapons. A modified sniper rifle designed for extreme cold weather operations, a sidearm that would function at temperatures that froze normal guns, knives made from special steel that stayed sharp in ice and snow. Minho laid everything out on his small table and began checking each item. Muscle memory took over. His hands moved automatically, inspecting every piece of equipment with the skill of someone who had trusted his life to these tools many times before. The rifle was perfect. He had maintained it carefully even during his exile. The scope was calibrated for extreme distance shooting in Arctic conditions. The ammunition was specially designed to perform in temperatures that would make normal bullets useless. As he worked, his mind wandered to his sister. Sora had been 25 when he disappeared, a brilliant scientist even then, working on her doctorate in biology. She had tried to contact him many times in the first few years. He had ignored every message. Now she was reaching out again. The world was being invaded by aliens who thought the frozen regions were worthless. They had no idea what kind of predator lived in those regions. What kind of ghost haunted the endless white? Minho finished checking his equipment and sat back. In his chair, outside his small underground home, a blizzard was building. He could hear the wind growing stronger, howling across the frozen landscape above. Normal people would stay inside during weather like this. Normal people would wait for the storm to pass. But Minho was not normal people. He was the thing that lived in the storm, the ghost that moved through blizzards like other men walked through gardens. He thought about the alien admiral's words, ice rats hiding in caves. Worthless frozen wasteland. The aliens were about to learn something that conquered worlds had not taught them. Some environments did not make species weak. Some environments made them deadly. Minho stood up and began putting on his tactical gear. It fit perfectly, like a second skin. The weight felt familiar and comforting. For 15 years he had been Kong Minho the exile. The broken soldier hiding from his past, but the world needed the Arctic ghost. Outside, the storm was getting worse. Perfect hunting weather. It was time to go to work. Minho gathered his weapons and equipment, then moved to the small exit tunnel that led to the surface. He had not left his underground home in 6 months. The world above was about to discover that some ghosts never really died. They just waited for the right moment to return. The aliens thought they were hunting ice rats. They had no idea that the ice rats had a guardian, and he was coming. 15 years earlier, Captain Kong Minho stood at the edge of the world. Antarctica stretched out before him like a white ocean, endless and beautiful and deadly. Behind him, his 6-man team prepared their gear for what would be their final mission. Together, Ghost, you seeing this weather report? Sergeant Park Wonho called out, checking his rifle one more time. Temperature dropping to -40 tonight. Wind speeds up to 80 kilometers per hour. Minho smiled without turning around. Perfect hunting weather. Wonho, the colder it gets, the better we work. The team laughed. They had been together for 3 years, operating in the most dangerous frozen regions on Earth. While other Special Forces units avoided extreme weather, the Frost Wolves went looking for it. The worse the conditions, the bigger their advantage. Target briefing in 5 minutes, Lieutenant Kim Yemen announced. He was the youngest member of the team but had proven himself in a dozen operations. Intelligence says the terrorists have 12 hostages at the research station. Minho nodded and turned away from the endless white landscape. His team gathered around a tactical map spread on a equipment crate. The research station was marked with a red dot, surrounded by nothing but ice and snow for hundreds of kilometers. The terrorists call themselves the Arctic Liberation Front, Yemen explained. They took over the station 6 hours ago. They want all nations to withdraw from Antarctica, or they start killing hostages. Corporal Lee Hunmu studied the map carefully. Only one way in or out, by vehicle. The landing strip here. But in this weather, no aircraft can land, which is why we walk, Minho said quietly. 50 kilometers across the ice. We approach from the north, where they won't expect anyone to survive the crossing. Private Jung Suman grinned. 50 kilometers in a blizzard. These guys picked the wrong team to mess with. The team spent the next hour going over the plan. They would move at night during the worst of the storm. The cold and wind would hide their approach and freeze any electronic sensors the terrorists might have. By dawn, they would be in position to strike. Remember, Minho told his team as they prepared to move out, we are ghosts in the ice. We move like the wind, we strike like lightning, and we leave no trace. The mission began perfectly. The Frost Wolves moved across the frozen landscape like they were born to it. While normal soldiers would have died in the brutal cold, Minho's team thrived. They had trained for years in conditions that would kill other men. The blizzard was so fierce that visibility dropped to less than 5 meters. Perfect cover. They moved in single file, following Minho's lead. He navigated by instinct and experience, reading the ice like other men read books. 6 hours into the march, they reached the research station. Through the swirling snow, they could see lights in the windows. The terrorists inside were warm and comfortable. They had no idea that death was walking toward them through the storm. Minho positioned his team around the building. Each man knew his job. They had practiced this scenario dozens of times. Fast, silent, efficient. In and out before the enemy knew what hit them. All units in position, Minho whispered into his radio, beginning entry in 30 seconds. That was when everything went wrong. The explosion came from inside the building. A massive blast that shook the ground and lit up the night sky. Windows shattered. Part of the roof collapsed. Emergency alarms began wailing. What the hell was that? Wanho shouted over the radio. Minho was already moving toward the building. The terrorists just blew something up. Could be a trap or they're destroying evidence. All units converge on the main entrance. Now, but as they approached the burning building, Minho realized the truth was much worse. The terrorist had not set off a bomb. Something else had exploded. Something that was never supposed to be at a research station. Ghost, you need to see this. Yemen called from the building's entrance. His voice was tight with fear. Minho entered the building and saw what had terrified his lieutenant. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, but they were not the hostages or terrorists. They were soldiers. Special Forces soldiers from 3 different countries, all wearing Arctic gear. There was another team here, Hunhua said quietly. Maybe, 2 other teams, they hit the place before us. But who were they? Sumin asked. And why didn't we know about it? Minho studied the scene carefully. The dead soldiers carried weapons he did not recognize. Their gear was more advanced than anything he had seen. And they all wore identical patches with a symbol he had never encountered. This wasn't supposed to be here, he said finally. Whatever these people were doing, it wasn't on any intelligence report we received. A weak voice called out from deeper in the building. Help me. Please help me. The team found Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the hostages, trapped under debris from the explosion. She was badly hurt but alive. As they worked to free her, she told them what had really happened. They weren't terrorists, she whispered. The men who took us, they were soldiers. From some government program, they came here looking for something. A weapon. What kind of weapon? Minho asked. Biological, a virus that had been frozen in the ice for thousands of years. We were studying it. Then these soldiers came and took our research. They were going to sell it to the highest bidder. The pieces were falling into place. This had never been a terrorist operation. It was a theft. Someone had stolen a dangerous biological weapon and made it look like terrorism to cover their tracks. Where are the other hostages? Yemen asked. Dr. Chun's face went pale. Gone. The soldiers took them when they left, but they left something behind. In the lab, they were afraid to transport it. Minho felt ice forming in his stomach. What did they leave? A sample of the virus. In a containment unit, but the explosion damaged the containment system. If that unit fails, the virus will be released into the atmosphere. The team looked at each other in horror. A virus that had been frozen for thousands of years, now about to be released in one of the most isolated places on Earth. If it spread, it could reach populated areas within days. How long do we have? Minho asked. The containment unit is running on backup power, maybe 6 hours before it fails completely. 6 hours to prevent a global pandemic. And they were hundreds of kilometers from the nearest help, trapped in a blizzard that would ground any rescue aircraft. We have to destroy it, Wanho said. Burn the whole building down. The fire might not be hot enough, Dr. Chen warned. This virus survived being frozen. It might survive burning too. Minho made the decision that would haunt him for 15 years. We stay. We guard the containment unit until help arrives. No matter what happens, that virus does not leave this place. But help never came. The storm lasted for 3 days. And on the 2nd day, the containment unit began to fail. What happened next was classified at the highest levels. The official report said that Captain Kong Minho and his team died heroically, preventing a terrorist attack. The truth was much more complicated. The truth was that 5 good soldiers died to save the world. And the survivors spent 15 years in exile, carrying the weight of their sacrifice. Now, as alien ships darkened Earth's sky, Minho remembered his team's final words. Jung Suman had smiled even as the cold took her. We're ghosts in the ice, Captain. Will always be ghosts in the ice. The frost wolves were gone, but their ghosts remained, and the aliens were about to meet him. Colonel Kim Dae-ho died on a Tuesday morning. Minho watched the execution on his small screen from 300 kilometers away. The aliens had captured Earth's remaining military leaders after destroying the Global Defense Command. They lined them up in front of cameras and killed them one by one to show the world that resistance was hopeless. Dae-ho was the last to die. He stood straight and proud, even with alien weapons pointed at his head. Before they killed him, he looked directly into the camera and spoke 4 words in Korean. The ghost still lives. Minho turned off the screen and sat in silence for a long time. Dae-ho had been his friend for 20 years. They had served together. Before Minho joined the Frost Wolves, Dae-ho knew about the exile. He knew where Minho was hiding, and with his final words, he had passed a message. It was time. Minho suited up in his cold weather gear and gathered his weapons. He had not left his underground shelter in 6 months, but his body remembered every movement. The tactical vest fit perfectly. The rifle felt like part of his arm. The knife slid into its sheath like it belonged there. He climbed through the exit tunnel to the surface. The world above was white and endless under a gray sky. The temperature was -30 degrees Celsius. Wind blew snow across the frozen landscape in patterns that looked like ghosts dancing. Perfect hunting weather. Minho moved across the ice with practiced ease. His snowshoes left barely any tracks, and the wind erased even those within minutes. He had learned to move through this landscape like he was part of it. The cold did not bother him. The wind did not slow him down. He was the ghost in the machine of winter. His first target was an alien patrol that had landed near an abandoned weather station 40 kilometers from his shelter. Intelligence reports said the aliens were setting up monitoring posts to watch for human activity. They had chosen the weather station because it was isolated and gave them a clear view of the surrounding area. What they did not know was that isolation worked both ways. Minho reached the weather station after 8 hours of careful movement. He positioned himself on a ridge 2 kilometers away and studied the alien camp through his rifle scope. 5 aliens moved around the station, setting up equipment and sensors. They wore thick armor and heating units to protect them from the cold. The aliens looked uncomfortable. They moved slowly and stayed close to their portable heaters. Every few minutes, one of them would go inside the station to warm up. These were creatures from warm worlds, and Earth's cold was already working against them. Minho waited until the wind picked up and snow began to fall heavily. Then he took his shot. The first alien dropped without a sound. Its companions looked around in confusion, searching for the source of the attack. But in the swirling snow, they could see nothing. The wind covered the sound of the gunshot. Minho moved position and took his second shot. Another alien fell. The remaining 3 began to panic, calling out in their harsh alien language. They fired their weapons randomly into the snow, hitting nothing. By the time the storm cleared an hour later, all 5 aliens were dead. Minho moved through the camp quickly, gathering intelligence and destroying their equipment. Then he disappeared, back into the white wilderness, leaving no trace of his presence. The alien commanders initially dismissed the incident as equipment failure. 5 soldiers lost in a blizzard on a frozen world. It happened sometimes. The cold was dangerous even with protective gear. But Admiral Dexfer was beginning to notice a pattern. Several patrols had gone missing in the northern regions. Communication posts had gone silent. Supply convoys had vanished without a trace. Commander Dexper said to his second-in-command, "What is the status of our northern operations?" Commander Vextar checked his reports. "We have lost contact with 7 monitoring posts in the past week, and 3 supply convoys have failed to reach their destinations. Equipment failures. That was our assumption. The cold is more severe than our environmental specialists predicted." But Vextar hesitated. But what? Some of the missing patrols managed to send partial distress signals before they were lost. The signals mentioned contact with an unknown enemy. Vexfer studied the tactical display showing Earth's northern regions, vast areas of white-marked territories his forces had not yet bothered to occupy. Frozen wasteland that no intelligent species would want to live in. "Impossible," he said finally. "Our intelligence shows those regions are uninhabited. Nothing but ice and snow." "Perhaps some humans are hiding in the frozen areas," Vexter suggested. "Survivors from the cities we destroyed. Hiding like ice rats in caves." Dexfer agreed. "Very well. Send additional patrols to sweep the northern regions. If there are human survivors hiding in the ice, we will find them and eliminate them." What Dexfer did not understand was that he was not dealing with survivors hiding in the ice. He was dealing with something that lived in the ice. Something that had been born in the frozen places and shaped by 15 years of bitter cold and isolation. Minho struck again 2 days later. A supply convoy carrying equipment to a forward base disappeared during a blizzard. When the storm cleared, searchers found the convoy's vehicles empty and covered in snow. The alien crews were gone. The supplies were destroyed. There were no signs of struggle and no indication of what had happened to the missing soldiers. The attacks continued. Alien patrols vanished in the white wilderness. Communication posts went silent in the middle of routine transmissions. Forward bases woke up to find their perimeter guards missing and their sensors disabled. Each attack was different, but they all shared certain characteristics. They happened during bad weather when visibility was low. They left no traces. And they targeted isolated units that were far from reinforcement. The aliens began to grow nervous about operating in the northern regions. Soldiers requested transfers away from cold weather assignments. Officers started requiring larger patrol groups and more frequent check-ins, but none of it helped. The ghost in the ice struck when and where he chose. He used the weather as his weapon and the landscape as his shield. The aliens had superior technology and overwhelming numbers, but they were fighting in an environment that was completely alien to them. Meanwhile, Minho was fighting in his natural habitat. After 2 weeks of losses, Admiral Vexfer called an emergency meeting with his senior commanders. The tactical display showed dozens of red marks in the northern regions, each one representing a lost patrol or failed mission. "This is unacceptable," Vexfer said, his yellow eyes blazing with anger. "We are losing more soldiers to this frozen wasteland than we lost conquering 3 entire worlds." "Sir," Commander Vextar said carefully, Perhaps we should consider withdrawing from the northern regions until we can develop better cold weather equipment. Withdraw. Vexvar's voice rose to a roar. We do not withdraw from ice rats hiding in caves. We are the Vorthok Empire. We have conquered species far more advanced than these primitive humans. But even as he spoke, Vexvar felt a cold fear growing in his heart. Something was hunting his soldiers in the frozen wilderness. Something that struck like lightning and disappeared like smoke. Something that might not be entirely human anymore. In the endless white silence of the Siberian tundra, Kong Minho cleaned his rifle and prepared for the next hunt. The aliens thought they were fighting survivors. They had no idea they were facing the apex predator of the frozen world. The ghost was awake, and he was just getting started. Dr. Lee Sora crouched in the hidden laboratory, 300 meters below the frozen ground. Around her, computer screens showed data that could change the course of the war. She had been studying the alien bodies that Minho had left behind, and what she discovered gave her hope. The aliens are not adapted for cold environments, she said into her encrypted communicator. Their blood chemistry changes when exposed to low temperatures. They become sluggish and their reaction times slowed down significantly. Minho's voice came through the static-filled connection. How sluggish? At -20 degrees, their reflexes are 30% slower than normal. At -40, they can barely function. Brother, the cold is killing them faster than your bullets. Minho smiled grimly as he adjusted his position on the snowy ridge. Below him, an alien supply depot sat like a metal scar on the white landscape. Dozens of aliens moved around the facility, but they stayed close to the heated buildings. Even with their protective gear, they were suffering. What about their equipment? Minho asked. Their weapons and vehicles are designed for temperate climates. The extreme cold affects their power systems and targeting computers. They have to keep everything heated or it stops working. This was exactly what Minho needed to hear. He had been planning his biggest operation yet, and now he knew how to make it work. The supply depot was critical to alien operations in the northern regions. It provided food, fuel, and equipment to 12 forward bases scattered across the tundra. If Minho could destroy it, the aliens would have to choose between abandoning their northern positions or sending supplies through dangerous routes that he could easily ambush. But the depot was heavily defended. 50 aliens guarded the facility, and they had learned from their previous losses. They kept their patrols large and close to base. They never went out alone, and they always stayed in communication with headquarters. Minho had been watching the depot for 3 days, learning their routines and finding their weaknesses. The aliens were predictable. They followed the same patrol routes at the same times every day. They rotated guards on a strict schedule. They did everything by the book. The problem was that their book was written for fighting on warm worlds against normal enemies. It did not account for a predator who lived in the cold and used the weather as a weapon. A blizzard was coming. Minho could feel it in the air, see it in the way the wind patterns were changing. In 6 hours, visibility would drop to 0, and the temperature would plummet. Perfect conditions for what he had planned. He moved to his first position, a communications relay station 2 kilometers from the main depot. The station was lightly guarded, only for aliens, but it was the key to everything. If he could take out the communications, the depot would be isolated from reinforcements. The storm hit right on schedule. Snow began falling in thick sheets, and the wind howled across the frozen landscape. Minho moved through the blizzard like a ghost, invisible and silent. The first alien guard never saw him coming. Minho's knife found its target before the guard could raise an alarm. The second guard fell to a silenced pistol shot. The third and fourth guards were huddled inside the station, trying to stay warm. They died without knowing they were under attack. Minho planted explosive charges throughout the communications equipment, then melted back into the storm. 10 minutes later, the relay station disappeared in a ball of fire. The aliens at the main depot were now cut off from the outside world. But Minho was not finished. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and he intended to make the most of it. His next target was the depot's power plant. The aliens needed massive amounts of energy to keep their equipment heated and functional. Without power, their weapons would freeze and their vehicles would not start. The power plant was better defended than the communications station. 10 guards patrolled the perimeter, and they were staying alert despite the storm. But Minho had advantages they could not match. He could see in conditions that left them nearly blind. He could move silently through snow that made their footsteps sound like thunder. One by one, the guards disappeared. A shape would emerge from the swirling snow, strike with lethal precision, and vanish again. By the time the remaining guards realized they were under attack, only 2 of them were left alive. They ran back toward the main depot, screaming warnings into their radios. But their communications were down, and their voices were lost in the howling wind. Minho entered the power plant and went to work. He had studied the alien technology for weeks, learning how their systems worked. The power plant was actually simpler than human designs, but it had one critical weakness. It was not designed to function if the cooling systems failed. Minho disabled the cooling systems and then destroyed the backup generators. The main reactor would overheat and shut down automatically within minutes. The aliens would be left in the dark and cold, their equipment useless. As he prepared to leave the power plant, Minho heard something that made him pause. Voices in the storm. Human voices, speaking Korean. He followed the sound and found something that made his blood run cold. A group of human prisoners was being held in a building near the depot's main entrance. His sister's voice was among them. Sora was supposed to be safe in the hidden laboratory. What was she doing here? Minho moved closer to the building and listened. Through the wind, he could hear alien voices as well. They were interrogating the prisoners, trying to learn the location of the hidden research facility. Tell us where the laboratory is, an alien voice demanded in broken Korean. Tell us, and we will let you live. We don't know anything, Sora replied calmly. You're wasting your time. Minho felt rage building in his chest. The aliens had his sister. They were threatening her, and there was nothing he could do to help her without revealing his position, or was there. The storm was getting worse. Visibility was down to less than 5 meters. The alien guards were huddled inside their heated vehicles, unable to see anything outside. This was Minho's chance. He moved around the building, counting guards and exits. 12 aliens were inside with the prisoners. 6 more were outside in vehicles. The building had 2 entrances and no windows. Minho planted explosive charges on the alien vehicles, then positioned himself near the main entrance. When the power plant finally shut down, the entire depot would go dark. In that moment of confusion, he would strike. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but it was too late. Minho was already inside the building. Moving like a shadow through the dim red light, his knife found the first guard before the alien could draw his weapon. The second guard managed to shout a warning before Minho silenced him permanently. The remaining aliens panicked, firing their weapons wildly in the darkness. But their shots went wide, and Minho was already among them. He moved with deadly precision, using the chaos to his advantage. In less than 2 minutes, all 12 guards were dead. Sora, Minho called out in Korean. It's me. His sister's voice came from the darkness. Brother, how did you find us? Long story. We need to get out of here. Now, Minho led the prisoners outside, where the storm provided perfect cover for their escape. But as they moved away from the depot, he realized something was wrong. The aliens were not pursuing them. They were regrouping, calling for reinforcements, and more importantly, they were no longer dismissing the northern regions as worthless wasteland. They knew now that something dangerous lived in the ice, something that had just struck at the heart of their operations, and one. Admiral Dexter was going to be very angry. And angry aliens made dangerous enemies. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Vexfer stood before the holographic display, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. The tactical map showed the northern regions of Earth, now marked with dozens of red zones where his forces had been attacked. In the past week alone, he had lost over 200 soldiers to an enemy he could not see or understand. Show me the footage from the depot attack, he commanded. The hologram shifted to show security recordings from the supply depot. Grainy images revealed a figure moving through the storm like a shadow. The attacker was clearly human, but he moved with impossible speed and precision. He appeared and disappeared like smoke, striking without warning and leaving no survivors. Replay the sequence from the power plant. Vexfer ordered. The footage showed the human infiltrator disabling guard after guard with mechanical efficiency. Each kill was swift and silent. The attacker seemed to know exactly where every alien would be and how they would react. This is not some surviving ice rat, Vexfer said finally. This is a trained killer, a specialist in cold weather warfare. Commander, Vexter nodded grimly. Our intelligence was wrong. Admiral B. The humans do have military assets in the frozen regions. Assets we severely underestimated. One human, Vexfer said, one single human has cost us more casualties than entire planetary invasions. How is this possible? The environment, sir. Our soldiers are not adapted for extreme cold. Their equipment malfunctions. Their reflexes slow. They cannot fight effectively. In those conditions, Vexfer turned away from the display, his mind racing. The Galactic Coalition had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that used the planet itself as a weapon. Withdraw all forces from the northern regions, he commanded. Sir Vextar looked surprised. You heard me. Pull back to the temperate zones. Establish a defensive perimeter and wait. What are we waiting for, Admiral? Vexfer smiled, showing his sharp teeth. For our special forces to arrive, I have called in the thermal guard. Vexter felt a chill that had nothing to do with Earth's cold. The thermal guard were the elite of the elite. Warriors bred and trained. For the most dangerous missions in the galaxy, they had never failed to eliminate a target. When will they arrive? Vexter asked. Tomorrow. And when they do, this ghost in the ice will learn what it means to face real predators. 300 kilometers away, Minho was having the same conversation with his sister. They sat in the hidden laboratory, surrounded by rescued prisoners and captured alien technology. Sora had been analyzing the enemy's equipment while Minho planned his next move. "They're pulling back," Sora said, studying the intercepted communications. "All alien forces are withdrawing from the northern regions." "That's not good," Minho replied. "Vexpur is too smart to give up. He's planning something." "What could he be planning?" "You've proven that his forces can't operate effectively in the cold." Minho studied the tactical displays, his instincts warning him of danger. "He's bringing in specialists. Soldiers trained for extreme environments." As if summoned by his words, the communications array lit up with an incoming message. Alien voices spoke in their harsh language, but the translation software quickly provided subtitles. "Thermal guard transport approaching landing zone. ETA 6 hours. Prepare hot zone for immediate deployment." Minho felt ice forming in his stomach. The thermal guard, he had heard rumors about them during his military service. Elite alien warriors equipped with advanced heating systems and cold weather gear. They were said to be unbeatable in any environment. "Brother," Sora said quietly, "maybe it's time to consider evacuation. We've rescued the prisoners. We've gathered intelligence. We could disappear deeper into the tundra." Minho shook his head. "They'll keep coming. And now they know we exist. If we run, they'll hunt us down systematically. Our only chance is to hit them first, while they're still adapting to the environment." "You're talking about fighting their elite forces alone." "Not alone," Minho said, looking at the other rescued prisoners. Several of them were military personnel, former members of Arctic units. "We have help now." But even as he spoke, Minho knew the truth. The thermal guard would be unlike any enemy he had faced. They would be prepared for his tactics, equipped for the cold, and trained to hunt in packs. The next morning, the alien transport ship landed in a flat area 50 kilometers from Minho's position. Through his scope, he watched as 20 figures emerged from the craft. They were larger than normal aliens, covered in advanced armor that glowed with internal heat. Steam rose from their bodies as they moved, creating clouds in the frigid air. "Thermal guard confirmed on ground," he reported. "To the hidden base, 20 units, full environmental gear. They're setting up a forward camp." The thermal guard moved with professional precision. They established a perimeter, set up communication equipment, and began assembling what looked like a mobile command center. Everything they did showed years of training and experience. But Minho noticed something else. Despite their equipment, the thermal guard were still affected by the cold. They moved more slowly than they would in normal temperatures. Their armor was bulky and restricted their movement. And most importantly, their heating systems created thermal signatures that glowed like beacons in his infrared scope. "They're still aliens," he said to himself. "No matter how much gear they have, they're still fighting in my world." Minho began to plan his attack. The thermal guard expected him to strike from long range, using the tactics that had worked against their regular forces. But elite soldiers would be ready for sniper attacks and ambushes. So Minho decided to do something they would never expect. He would attack them head-on, in the middle of a blizzard, using the storm itself as his weapon. The weather reports showed a massive storm system approaching. Winds up to 100 kilometers per hour. Temperature dropping to -50 degrees. Visibility near zero. It would be the storm of the century. Perfect hunting weather. As the storm approached, Minho made his final preparations. He checked his weapons, adjusted his cold weather gear, and said goodbye to his sister. "If I don't come back," he told her, "continue the research. Find their weaknesses. Help the resistance." "You will come back," Sora said firmly. "You're the Arctic ghost. Storms don't scare you." Minho smiled. "No, but what comes after the storm does." He left the hidden base. As the first snow began to fall, behind him, the people he had sworn to protect watched him disappear into the white wilderness. Ahead of him, 20 of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors waited in their heated camp. The storm was coming, and in its heart, the ghost would face his greatest challenge. The thermal guard thought they were the predators. They were about to learn the difference between hunting and being hunted. In the howling wind and driving snow, Kong Minho began his approach. The storm was his ally, the cold his weapon, and the ice his home. Let them come. He was ready. The storm hit with the fury of a living thing. Wind screamed across the frozen landscape at speeds that could knock a man down. Snow fell so thick that visibility dropped to arm's length. The temperature plummeted to -55 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds. In the middle of this chaos, 20 of the galaxy's most elite warriors huddled in their heated shelters, waiting for the weather to pass. The thermal guard had fought on 100 worlds, but they had never experienced anything like this storm. Commander Zethrak, one of the warriors, reported, "Our thermal imaging is useless in these conditions. The storm is interfering with all our sensors." Commander Zethrak was the leader of the thermal guard, a veteran of 30 campaigns. His armor was more advanced than the others, with multiple heating systems and enhanced protection. But even he was struggling with the brutal cold. "How long until the storm passes?" he asked. Weather analysis suggests another 6 hours, minimum, possibly longer. Zethrak cursed in his native language. 6 hours trapped in this frozen hell, while their target could be anywhere in the storm. The human they were hunting was obviously skilled, but no one could operate in weather like this, or so he thought. 300 meters away, Kong Minho moved through the blizzard like he was born in it. The storm that trapped the aliens was his natural element. He had spent 15 years learning to read the wind patterns, to navigate by sound and instinct when sight failed. He reached the alien camp and circled it slowly, studying their defenses. The thermal guard had positioned their shelters in a defensive formation, with overlapping fields of fire. Sentries stood guard at regular intervals, their armor glowing with heat signatures. But the storm was disrupting everything. The sentries could barely see beyond their own positions, their communication systems were fighting static from the wind, and most importantly, their heating systems were working overtime to keep them functional, draining power and creating noise that covered Minho's approach. Minho had studied the captured thermal guard equipment that his sister's team had analyzed. He knew their capabilities and their weaknesses. The armor was strong but had joints that could be targeted. The heating systems were efficient but had vulnerable power connections, and the warriors inside were still living beings who could be killed if you knew how. He began with the outer sentries. The first guard never saw him coming. Minho emerged from the swirling snow like a ghost, his knife finding the weak point between helmet and chest armor. The guard dropped silently, his thermal signature fading as his heating system failed. The second guard was more alert, turning at the last moment to face his attacker, but Minho was already inside his reach, too close for the alien's weapon to target him. The fight lasted 3 seconds. One by one, the outer perimeter fell. Each kill was swift and silent, the bodies disappearing into the storm before they could be discovered. The remaining thermal guard had no idea that death was closing in around them. Perimeter check in 5 minutes, Commander Zethrak announced. Over the radio, all units respond. The responses came back one by one, but 3 sentries failed to answer. Units 7, 12, and 15, respond immediately. Zethrak ordered, silence. Emergency protocol, Zethrak commanded. All units to defensive positions. We are under attack. The remaining thermal guard moved into formation, their weapons ready and their sensors scanning for threats. But the storm made it impossible to see more than a few meters in any direction. Commander, one of the warriors reported, I'm reading thermal signatures at the edge of our sensor range. Multiple contacts, moving in a circle around our position. Zethrak studied his display. The signatures were faint and intermittent, appearing and disappearing in the storm. How many? Difficult to say, at least 6, possibly more. Zethrak felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Intelligence reports said they were hunting one human operative, but the thermal readings suggested multiple attackers. What he did not know was that Minho was carrying the heating units from the dead sentries, using them to create false thermal signatures. The storm scattered the heat patterns, making it appear that a team of attackers was surrounding the camp. Open fire on any thermal signature outside our perimeter, Zethrak ordered. The thermal guard unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons into the storm. Beams of superheated plasma lit up the night, melting snow and ice wherever they struck. For 30 seconds, the camp was surrounded by a wall of destruction. But when the firing stopped, the thermal signatures were still there, still moving, still circling. Impossible, one of the warriors whispered. Nothing could survive that bombardment. That was when Minho struck. He came from the direction they least expected. Dropping from above onto the roof of the command shelter, the thermal guard were so focused on the false signatures that they never thought to look up. Minho's explosive charges destroyed the command shelter and killed 3 warriors instantly. As the survivor scrambled to respond, he was already moving to his next target. The camp descended into chaos. Warriors fired at shadows and thermal ghosts while their real enemy moved among them like death itself. Minho used the storm as cover, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before they could react. He's inside the perimeter, Zethrak shouted over the radio. All units converge on my position. But the storm was breaking up their communications. Half the warriors could not hear the orders, and the other half could not see where they were supposed to go. Minho systematically destroyed their equipment and eliminated their personnel. Each attack was calculated for maximum impact. He targeted their power systems, leaving them in darkness. He destroyed their weapons, leaving them defenseless. And he killed their leaders, leaving them without coordination. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, 19 of the galaxy's most elite warriors lay dead in the snow. Only Commander Zethrak remained alive, trapped in his damaged armor as his heating system failed. Minho approached the fallen commander, his rifle ready. Zethrak looked up at him with something that might have been respect. You are the ghost they spoke of, Zethrak said in broken English. The human who lives in the ice. I am Minho, replied How did you defeat the thermal guard? We were trained for every environment, equipped for every threat. Minho looked around at the storm that still raged around them. You were trained to fight in environments. I was born in one. This is not my battlefield. This is my home. The coalition will send others. More warriors, better equipped. Let them come, Minho said. The ice is patient. It will take them all. Zethrak's heating system finally failed completely. The cold claimed him within minutes. Minho gathered intelligence from the alien equipment, then melted back into the storm. By the time the weather cleared, there was nothing left of the thermal guard except empty armor buried in the snow. The news of the thermal guard's destruction spread quickly through the alien fleet. Admiral Vexver received the report in stunned silence. His most elite warriors, killed by a single human in conditions that should have been impossible to survive. Sir, Commander Vexdar said carefully, perhaps we should reconsider our approach to the northern regions. Vexfor stared at the tactical display for a long time. The frozen regions that he had dismissed as worthless wasteland had become a graveyard for his forces. The ice rat he had mocked had proven to be the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. Send a message to the Coalition Command, Vexfor said finally. Request immediate reinforcement. Full battle fleet. Sir, for one human, not one human, Vexfor replied, one ghost. And ghosts, it seems, are harder to kill than we thought. 300 kilometers away, Minho returned to the hidden laboratory where his sister waited. The rescued prisoners greeted him as a hero, but he felt no satisfaction in the victory. The thermal guard had been skilled warriors, and their deaths weighed on him. The aliens are calling for reinforcements, Sora reported. Full fleet deployment. They're taking you seriously now. Good, Minho said. Fear makes them careless. Brother, you can't fight an entire fleet by yourself. Minho smiled for the first time in weeks. I won't be by myself. Word is spreading. Other resistance cells are forming. People are remembering that humans don't surrender easily. He walked to the window and looked out at the endless white landscape. Somewhere out there, alien commanders were planning their next move. They would bring more ships, more soldiers, more advanced weapons, but they would still be fighting in his world. In the ice and snow and bitter cold that had shaped him into what he was. The aliens had mocked Earth's tundra. They had called humans ice rats hiding in caves. They had dismissed the frozen regions as worthless wasteland. Now they knew better. The Arctic ghost was no longer hiding. The legend was reborn, and the galaxy would learn to fear the ghost that walked in the endless white dot in the frozen north, where the wind never stopped and the cold never ended. Humanity's guardian was ready. For whatever came next, let them send their fleets. Let them bring their armies. The ice was waiting, and so was he.